What is up, everybody, and welcome in. It is 10,000 Pitches, a podcast devoted to everything Minnesota soccer and beyond. My name is Jeremy Rushing, and alongside me this week, tagging back in for another round. We liked him so much last time. We figure we bring him back every now and then. Dominic Jose Bazonio not available this week, but to fill in as always, my secondary partner in crime on this podcast, Carter Hofer. Carter, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you, Jeremy?
I'm good. We are here for episode 134 of the podcast. A lot to get to in the world of Minnesota soccer, a lot of Minnesota United news on, and it turns out off the field as well for Minnesota to talk about. We have a big match against Chicago coming up this weekend. Well, what could be a big match against Chicago coming up this weekend, depending on certain availability. We'll get to that in a bit as well. We got signings for Minneapolis City, Minnesota Aurora, Rochester FC. We have cup sets galore in the U.S. Open Cup to get to, some with local implications as well. So we will get to all of that as we move along in the podcast. But of course, before we get to the news, before we get to all the information, got to let you know, if you're not subscribed to the podcast feed, please do so. Doesn't just let you know when a new episode of 10,000 Pitches drops every Friday. Also lets you know when we drop a new episode of Post Loons, our Minnesota United post-match show. Man, if you guys are tuning into Post Loons this year, thank you guys so much. Whether you're tuning in live, whether you're tuning in on Twitter, whether you're tuning in on YouTube, whether you're tuning in on the podcast, we are seeing like record-breaking numbers in terms of people tuning in, contributing to the show, just taking in that content. So we really, really appreciate it, guys. We've been up in the top 70 on the Apple podcast charts because of that multiple times in the last couple months since the season started. So to see that for like a very localized project like ours, we're like the small business of soccer media, if you will, to see us charting like that and to see all the interest there for that content, we really, really appreciate it. And if you think somebody else would be, interested in that, who maybe doesn't know about it or maybe just hasn't checked us out, be a friend, tell a friend. We'd really appreciate that as well. If you are watching live on patreon.com/SodaSoccer, thank you so much. Again, we go live here on the 10,000 Pitches podcast for our patrons. So if you are a patron in the $5 or $10 tiers at patreon.com/SodaSoccer, you get to tune into the podcast live. You can ask questions if you'd like. And any of our patron tiers, you'll be able to get access to the podcast early after we're live as well, before it drops on Friday mornings. But however you tune in, whenever you tune in, thank you so much. And speaking of Patreon, if you want to support the great work we're doing, we just sent Jacob Schneider down to St. Louis for the St. Louis City match, which we will get to in just a moment. He was able to get some, exclusive tidbits, exclusive quotes from Adrian Heath, Will Trapp that you're not going to get anywhere else. If you want to support that work and ensure that we can keep doing things like that as the season progresses, for more road matches as the season progresses, make sure that you are supporting us on our patreon.com/SodaSoccer. We would like to. Okay. You know what? Screw it. We're gonna make this a formal challenge. I am doing this right now. I'm just off the top of my head. We want to get to 60 patrons by the end of April. We need 12 to get there. So if you want to support us, you want to help us hit that goal, we will go to another road match. We will go, we'll go down to Kansas City on May 13th. That's what we will do. If we hit 60 patrons by the end of April on May 13th, we will go down and cover Minnesota United and Sporting Kansas City down in KC on site, getting that exclusive content that we can only get by being there in person. So if you want to make sure we can do that, you like that exclusive content, and you're not a patron, become a patron. But again, if you are a patron and you think somebody else could benefit from being one, make sure you're being a friend, telling a friend, sharing us on social media, doing what we have to do to spread the word about patreon.com/SodaSoccer. I will shut up about Patreon in just a second, but one last thing. If you're a patron, you already know this, but if you're not, we also give you not only early access to podcasts, you're also not just supporting our work. You get kind of exclusive news and tidbits that we get from Minnesota United training sessions. We put up a match day thread every single match day, different things like that. So it's early access, but also some exclusive tidbits. We want to thank those who support us as much as humanly possible. So if you want some, exclusive things you're not going to find anywhere else as far as tidbits from training and of course on match day, you can check us out. Again, patreon.com/SodaSoccer. All right, shutting up about Patreon. We are now getting into the news and headlines. You ready for this, Carter?
Absolutely. Let's roll.
All right. So where else are we going to start? A 1-0 win for Minnesota United in St. Louis. It's the Loons' third straight road win to start the season. 3 road matches, 9 points from those matches. Pretty crazy. Dallas, Colorado, and St. Louis, all wins on the road to start the campaign. It was the 4-4-2 again from Heath. And based off what we've said in training and what we've asked Heath in training and what he's been saying about this, it ain't going anywhere, this 4-4-2. It was Amarilla and Garcia up top again, Fraga and Bongi on the wings, Trapp and Arriaga in the middle. DJ Taylor starts at right back for Zarek Valentin in this one. And then you get Tapias and Boxall at center back and Kamar Lawrence on the left. I personally really like the 4-4-2 for this team. I think the only thing that we could see different, it might make it a little bit more optimal, is maybe have Robin Lod be that second striker next to whether it's Amarilla or Garcia. I'm probably leaning Garcia of those two still right now, even with Amarilla's goal on Saturday. But what say you, Carter? What say you to the potential Lod and potentially, let's say Lod and Garcia up top in the 4-4-2 for Minnesota moving forward?
I definitely think that it's a possibility, especially with what we saw from Lod last year when he played in the striker, that false 9 position. It wouldn't surprise me, absolutely. But I would also like to see this maybe transition to more of a 4-2-4 rather than a 4-4-2. Really allow Fraga and Bongi to get up and then just allow all 4 of the attackers to just mingle. I think that would help a lot of our attackers, including both of our strikers, Garcia and Amarilla, because they're not strikers in the traditional sense. They both like to do different things. Amarilla is very hold up and then run off of it. Garcia likes to make runs, so he's not going to be that like strong, give me the ball, I'm going to do this thing. I think that getting that up into that 4-2-4 gives them the chance to play to their abilities.
Yeah.
So
I think there's something to that. And I also think this 4-4-2 could also be flexible enough where it can exchange between those two within the match. Like maybe they defend in a 4-4-2, but attack in more of a 4-2-4, if you will. I saw at times the formation sort of mold into a 4-3-3 in defense at certain times in the match as well. So I think it gives the Loons for a lot of the other positives it gives both defensively and in the attack for this team. I also think it gives them a lot of flexibility in how they can move things around within the match, which I think, flexibility has been a cornerstone of what Adrian Heath, wants in his system with the players, with the way he's set up. So I think that definitely aligns. Speaking of Robin Lod, we did not see him in this one. He was out with an illness. He was just not able to get ready in time. I have to imagine travel to and from for international duty probably played a factor in that. One thing Adrian Heath did tell us last week, with both Lod and Boxall sort of being ill during the week, he kept those guys the hell away from the rest of the team. We've seen situations with the Timberwolves earlier this year, I think, where there was just a bug that went all through the locker room and they're missing 4 or 5 guys for a match. Obviously not something you can afford for Minnesota United when you're already missing your best player. So, good on them for recognizing that early and sort of a quarantine situation, if you will. But Lod just wasn't able to get back, get healthy enough to make the trip. Michael Boxall was, and we saw him start. We saw him play a significant amount of time in this team. So that was good. But we also didn't see Sane Bin Jung in this one. We were really hoping, and it seemed Heath seemed really optimistic early in the week last week that Jung would be able to make his debut. He had his visa appointment the previous Sunday, and it was successful. And so they thought, okay, all he has to do is get his passport back and he's good to go. But I mean, this is immigration we're talking about. It's a process. I feel like soccer fans probably know more about immigration than like the general like sports fan in another sport or just the general human being because of how many players come in from internationally and things like this. But we kind of got we've gotten our glimpse through, these past couple of years with international signings of how this process can work, immigration. You think one thing, and then the next day, all of a sudden it's like, oh, no, we're not going to get him back, but maybe we will, but maybe we won't. We booked him these flights. Hopefully he can get on one of them and get back in time. Oh, maybe he's going to meet us in St. Louis. But it just didn't end up happening. He wasn't able to get his passport back in time to get back. So he is, presumably going to make his debut this Saturday against Chicago. Match that we will get to in a minute. But let's kind of get into the match as far as Minnesota and St. Louis goes. It was Luis Amarilla earning and finishing a PK in the 78th minute for the lone goal. Probably one of the worst tackles I have ever seen in my life by Kyle Hebert. I was watching the MLS recap or MLS whatever, where they just kind of go through all the
matches. Wrap around.
Yeah, where they kind of go through all the matches and recap them in like 30 seconds or whatever. The guy, whoever the voiceover guy is for this particular piece of content from MLS, was not kind to Kyle Hiebert in this circumstance, nor should he be, and nor were John Marthaler or I on Post Loons on Saturday. The ball's 10 yards away. He just completely takes out Amarilla in the box, throws his hands up like he didn't do anything. That was my favorite part. But Amarilla buries the PK in the 78th. And that was the scoring. That was it. 1-0 Minnesota United win. That's all they needed. And on St. Louis's side, despite 16 shots, the hosts finished with just 3 on target and an XG of 0.93. And this is how Minnesota United is going to win matches and get results. They're going to rely heavily on the defensive half, rely heavily on, whoever their defensive midfielders are. In this case, it was Trapp and Arriaga. I can't imagine that's going to change as we move forward, which is another reason why I might see Lod as that second striker, because I think Trapp and Arriaga are maybe your ideal central midfield at this point. You're going to rely on them to kind of be that front point of the defense. You're also going to rely on your strikers to play a role in the defense too, right? I mean, we saw Amarilla and Garcia back pressing like crazy in this one, which is what, this collective defending is a huge reason. And even if those lines get broken, you have, Boxall and Tapias in the middle of that back line, which, I don't think we've seen a back line this sturdy, this brick wallish since Ike Opara was on this team. Like, it's very, very just the collective defending, everybody picking each other up. This is how Minnesota United is going to win games. They're not going to go win 4-0. They're not going to just blow the doors off anybody. They're not going to go and score 2 MLS goal of the week type goals and worldies that'll show up on SC top 10 or whatever. That's not going to be their style this year. It's going to be collective defending and then just finding a way to get a goal anyhow, any way you possibly can. Which, that worked in 2019. They hosted a playoff game. This is, from my vantage point, top to bottom, no disrespect to the 2019 team, a marginally better roster, top to bottom in 2023. I can't imagine that wouldn't be successful, long-term for this team as we move forward as well.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of that 2019, that was also the year we made our US Open Cup run where we lost in the final to Atlanta. So it's a proven way for the Loons to win. Obviously, we haven't done it in a bit since we've had Reynoso, but now Reynoso is gone, and it's something that we can fall back on. And to your point on our defending, both Dane St. Clair and Michael Boxall made the MLS Team of the Week this week. They were that impactful in the St. Louis game, and that's all you can ask from them. So I do expect to see that be the game plan going forward for however long we don't have Reynoso. And we usually can find a way to get those goals. We should have had 2. Garcia put one off the post, and then Amarilla on that rebound, who knows where he was aiming.
Yikes. Yeah.
But I would expect them to put those away more often than not.
I asked Adrian Heath this week, and he didn't take exception to the question, but he seemed a little surprised by it. I asked him, do the defensive responsibilities for your strikers, do they potentially negatively impact the attacking output that they can provide with them expending more energy back pressing and in defense? Does that potentially, is one of the byproducts of that, maybe not as many finished chances? And he responded, he said, look, if we weren't creating chances, I'd be more concerned by that. But we're creating chances. It's just the final touch that we're missing. And it's hard to blame him. I mean, that's the one thing Minnesota United is lacking without Emmanuel Reynoso that maybe they won't be able to make up for, is when they get to the position where it's time to make that final pass that's going to spring the goal, or just make that final touch that's going to put the ball in the back of the net. That is where this team is sort of is lacking right now. And I'm not sure without Reynoso how they solve that particular issue. I think with all the good on every single other end and side and area of the pitch that we've seen, I think the positives outweigh the negatives there. But if Minnesota United is going to get bounced in the first round of the playoffs again, or if they're going to whatever shortcoming this team may face, not saying they will, but if that happens, if they do face some sort of shortcoming where they don't make as deep of a playoff run as they want to, or maybe, God forbid, they find themselves on the outside looking in at the end of it, that is going to be the area that kind of costs them in that regard. But at the same time, I think if the rest of the pitch keeps performing the way they are defensively, I don't necessarily see that being a major issue. But it is something to look out for. Can they start finishing these chances? They're creating opportunities. Can they start finishing them?
Always the hardest part of soccer, isn't it?
It is. It is. Goals change games. And if you can't get a goal, you're not going to change the game. So, but I will say another note on this match. We've seen a lot of criticism of this team. And, I guess that goes to Adrian Heath specifically as a manager as well in recent years, of them not, being out adjusted, if you will, quote unquote, out adjusted at halftime. Seems like whoever they were playing would make the better adjustments at halftime and be the better second half team than Minnesota. I would argue in St. Louis, Minnesota was once again the better second half team. I would argue 4 of the 5 matches this season, they have been marginally better in the second half. I'm including the Red Bulls match in there. They started really slow. They gave up that early, corner kick goal against the Red Bulls in the second half, but they were the better team for a vast majority of the second half in that match. I think the only match that they haven't been the better second half team for the full 45 plus was really the Vancouver match. That's pretty obvious. But I think all in all, whatever adjustments are being made at half, and I think we saw it specifically in this one where, wasn't looking too optimistic at halftime for Minnesota. They were really on the back foot. St. Louis was creating a lot of chances. Minnesota created a couple chances themselves, but had some real woof moments in finishing those. We saw Minnesota adjust at half, and against this pretty relentless St. Louis press, they were able to find a way, whatever adjustment they made at half, whether it was Heath, whether it was the players, whether it was the coaching staff, whatever combination of them, they were able to push that right button to start breaking that press and start getting in behind and starting creating more chances and really almost use St. Louis's press as like a positive for Minnesota and find a way to really spring past, break those lines. And if you're able to break St. Louis's press, you're going to find yourself in really advantageous situations towards goal. And that's what Minnesota was doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you've got to be happy to see it. Just like you said, everyone hasn't been very high up on Heath because of his adjustments, because of making subs too late, because of all of that. But you're absolutely right. Our second half was the much better half against St. Louis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, we saw it pay off. You eventually end up getting the goal. You hold it down at the end. You could argue St. Louis maybe should have finished at least one of those chances they had down the stretch, but they didn't. You do the job. You get the win. It's your 3rd straight road win, and you're undefeated now through 5. You're feeling really good. We'll get to the Reynoso off the field stuff in a minute, but I kind of want to bring this back into the fold because I think it is an ongoing question that Minnesota United fans are asking themselves. And honestly, in some way, shape, or form, we're starting to ask the team this in training as well, whether it's the players, whether it's Heath. We're trying to find ways to bring this up and trying to find ways to kind of figure this out for ourselves. But I mean, we talked about the collective defending, right? I mean, all 11 players are participating in the defense. Mano Reynoso isn't really much of a defender, So in a world where Reynoso comes back, does his unwillingness to defend negatively impact this team in that regard? Right? I think the ultimate question is Minnesota United actually better off without a Mano Reynoso? And from a talent standpoint, no. But from a collective unit standpoint, from a cohesion standpoint, from just a vibes standpoint, we saw the dance party. I don't know if you guys watching have all saw the dance party video on Minnesota United's Twitter, but check it out if you haven't. I mean, this team really enjoys being together, enjoys playing together. There is just a camaraderie in this team that we really haven't seen in their MLS tenure. And we've heard the stories and the reports of Reynoso being a bit of having a laissez-faire approach, I believe was the term used to the game and to defending specifically, to his job. We've heard reports and rumors of him being sort of a prima donna, not willing to maybe put in that extra work. But from a cohesion, from a camaraderie, from a collective unit standpoint, I don't think we've seen Minnesota this together since they've joined MLS.
Honestly, I think the more that games that we play, the more that we do things this season, the less controversial it is to say that we are better off without Reynoso. Mm-hmm. I think that oftentimes his lack of return to the back and defending did cost the team last year, but obviously his attacking is great. But I start seeing things like Arriaga playing Mender Garcia through against St. Louis for him to make that chance. And I think I'd rather have Arriaga creating and defending than Reynoso just creating.
Yep. And I think the big question will be, and we'll get to the Reynoso stuff that maybe impacts this hypothetical scenario, but I think the question will be if Reynoso does come back this year, can they insert him in a way that's going to kind of keep this collective unit together? Or will it be the same old, give the ball to Ray, everybody else run towards goal, and we'll see what happens? That's the question for me. And is that a better approach than what they are currently doing? I don't know. It's hard to argue for that right now. It really is hard to argue for that. You can't say 100% either way, obviously, but it's hard to argue that the give the ball to Ray and get out of the way approach, or give the ball to Ray and go towards the box approach, is better than what we're seeing especially from a defensive standpoint. We didn't see much strikers back pressing last year. We didn't see much of that. It really was on that back six. A lot of pressure was put on that back six to hold down the fort. And without Arriaga, a lot of pressure was put on that back four to hold down the fort. And then Bakaye Dibassy gets injured, and all of a sudden your back four, no disrespect to Brent Kallman at all, he has been very, very good when he has been called upon in depth situations and spot starts and things like that. But when you're relying on him for an extended period of time, it almost becomes a back three at that point. And you're relying on three players to defend. It's just that doesn't work, right? If you're gonna be that team, you need kind of everybody to participate in that defensive strategy, that defensive mindset, that defensive approach. And we're seeing that so far this year. And to me, that's the reason. That is the reason. Adrian Heath even said that is the reason this team is undefeated, because this team is defending collectively and finding a way to score goals. That's it. Or score enough goals to get results. That's it. And I don't know if we see that without Reynoso. And it's hard to compare. I mean, it's kind of a hypothetical question, in the timeline where Emmanuel Reynoso has been practicing and is on this team. I mean, are they better, worse, same, points wise, results wise so far this season? It's hard to compare, but I mean, undefeated through 5, it's hard to imagine they'd be any better.
I don't think you can get much better than 11 through 5 with Reynoso. I mean, I don't think you get 15 through 5 with Reynoso. So
yeah. Maybe
see more goals.
Yeah, maybe they blast Colorado 5-1 instead of coming back in the second half to grind out a 2-1 win. But honestly, that might be the one match that is impacted. But it's a match they got 3 points in anyways. So
you might see it in Vancouver too, since Reynoso wouldn't have been on international duty. But
correct.
That's still a big question mark with him playing with who was there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, who may be there for the Chicago Fire on Saturday is Xherdan Shaqiri. Wow, words. I actually haven't said his full name in a long time, out loud. I've written about him, and you usually just use Shaqiri when you're talking about him. Xherdan Shaqiri could be back for the Chicago Fire on Saturday. The latest report I saw from Fire training sessions this week said he's a quote unquote possibility to return on Saturday, which could obviously be a problem for Minnesota United and another big test for them defensively. The one addition to this, though, is there is a 19-year-old kid who has been playing extremely well in Shaqiri's absence. Brian Gutierrez. Foot mob stats wise, he has been the best player on the field for this team in Shaqiri's absence. He has 2 assists in the last 2 matches for this team during kind of their run of form. They got 4 points in the last 2 matches without Shaqiri in the lineup, a win and a draw. So this team has kind of found a way to kind of do it without him in the short term. But he's one of those guys. I mean, he's one of the highest paid players in MLS for a reason. He's the highest paid signing in Chicago Fire history. He is going to make an impact. He is a playmaker for the Chicago Fire team. Has he lived up to the contract that he was given? Not quite, but he still could be a problem for Minnesota. And this kind of brings in a scenario where Gutierrez is playing so good, you could potentially have Shaqiri and Gutierrez both on the field in the lineup at the same time. And again, just another challenge for this Minnesota United defense. And on the road, it's something they're going to have to be ready for. The Fire haven't been ultra impressive, but with those two attackers potentially in the lineup for Chicago, that defense is going to have to be on their A game if they want to try to grind out another result.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a big, big challenge here, even without Shaqiri. The Fire are very in and out right now, but they are capable of these massive 3-goal performances. Before they got blanked by DC United, they dropped 3 on Miami and 3 on Cincinnati, who not necessarily like upper echelon.
Cincinnati, if you ask a lot of people, are a supporter shield favorite this year. So
it'll be very interesting to see what Minnesota United does, who plays where, and what our defense is going to look like going into this game.
Yeah, 1 win, 3 draws, and 1 loss on the year for Chicago. So as you mentioned, Carter, it's a bit of a mixed bag for them early on in the season. Adrian Heath indicated earlier this week they are preparing as if Shaqiri is going to play. So that says anything. I think it's better to prepare for him to play and him not be in the lineup than vice versa. So probably a good call on their part. But again, that's Saturday, 7:30, Soldier Field in Chicago. And we'll have post loons for you after that one, right around 10:30 Central Time, here on our YouTube channel, on our Twitter channel, and obviously you can check out the podcast as always after the fact on the podcast feed. All right, that is it for Minnesota United on the field news. Now we are going to get to some new information we got on the Emmanuel Reynoso situation. So, Planeta Boca Juniors, which is the kind of the Boca main news site, if you will, kind of independent news site about the team, came out with a report yesterday. And there were a few pieces of information in this report. There was some personal information about Reynoso that was included in the report, which you can go check out if you would like. We're not going to necessarily get into that here, but there is some information, regarding Minnesota United and his potential future with the Loons, specifically that I think it is important to note. The first being, reportedly in this particular write-up, it says that Minnesota could be looking to block Reynoso from playing elsewhere over the remainder of his contract, which is through the end of 2026. MLS is weird enough where I don't necessarily know what positive implications could come from that from a team standpoint. Maybe it's salary relief, maybe it's getting the DP spot back, maybe it's, whatever it is, but they're, according to this report, looking into, talking to FIFA and looking into the possibility of essentially extending his suspension through the rest of his contract, which he just extended last year. So that is important to note. And, reading into this, again, this wasn't necessarily completely spelled out in the report, but just sort of reading the tea leaves here, I can't imagine this has a positive impact on the likelihood that he returns for Minnesota United this season.
Yeah, I mean, everything that I'm reading, everything that we're seeing, everything that's been reported just kind of puts Reynoso in a worse and worse light. It's becoming more and more obvious that he just doesn't want to return. Obviously, we don't necessarily know what that reason is and why he's not coming back and why he doesn't want to play with us. But it brings up a lot of questions in players' minds and coaches' minds and fans' minds, because all we can do really is speculate at this point. We don't know what's happening. We don't know what's going on inside his head. We don't know what's happening behind the scenes between him and Heath and him and the organization. So obviously, I don't know what's going to happen with this contract situation. I don't know very much at all about these MLS roster rules. They are confusing as all
wildly complicated.
Yeah. We could use a little Jacob Schneider on the podcast right now. But if there's anything that we can do to get a DP spot back, to not have to pay his salary, to just maybe force him back so that we can sell him off to another team in another league, maybe back to Boca Juniors, If he wants to stay in Argentina, we should definitely be exploring those options.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that we are.
This was sort of the subject of my Loons Daily newsletter, which if you have not subscribed to, you can do so in the show notes on YouTube or the podcast feed. And I included some quotes that we have been getting from the team regarding this particular subject as well. To be quite honest, they seem kind of sick of talking about it, but at the same time, when your best player is out for an extended period of time, as media, we have to ask the questions and we have to try to get any updates that we can on the situation as often as we can. And Adrian Heath has said, they're not going as far to say, or just relating back to the conversation that we had, 5 or so minutes ago, is this team actually better off without Ray? The team isn't going that far quite yet. Adrian Heath has been quoted as saying there's not a team in this league that wouldn't benefit and be better with a fit and healthy Emmanuel Reynoso. And we talked to Will Trapp earlier this week. And he said Reynoso is a guy that undoubtedly his quality is missed, he said. But Will Trapp did go on to say, quote, I think our group has done an amazing job to assume responsibility and take the onus on ourselves. So, that is something that's kind of aligns with kind of the pros of the situation that we discussed. This team is really coming together. They're a collective unit. They're holding each other more accountable. Kamar Lawrence a few weeks ago used the word togetherness and said there is a different sense of, the team accountability factor where they're expecting more of every other person on the team, amongst each other, of how much effort they give on the training ground, how much effort they put in their, their nutrition, their everything going on off the field as well. And obviously what happens on game days. There seems to be a more camaraderie, but a more accountability around this group, which is good to see. But as far as this information goes and Reynoso's future with the team, if they extend his suspension through the remainder of his contract, I'm not sure that will increase his desire or want to come back or make the relationship between player and club any more symbiotic, if you will. So that is the latest on Emmanuel Reynoso. Again, that was also in our Loons Daily newsletter today. So if you want to go check that out and subscribe, should be posted to the website by the time you hear this. You can check that out for free on the website. And then if you want to get more Minnesota United news every single day, make sure you subscribe to Loons Daily. All right. That is really it for first team Minnesota United news. We will get to MNUFC 2, the Minnesota United Academy, signings for USL League 2 and USLW League teams, US Open Cup, plenty to get to on the show in just a minute. But now I'm going to chat about our friends over at Stimulus Athletic. StimulusAthletic.com. If you're not watching and you're listening, it is spelled STIMULUS athletic.com. If you are a coach, an owner, you're in I guess for lack of a better term, a decision-making position for a club at the youth level, at the lower league level, amateur club, semi-pro club, whatever it is, your team deserves custom jerseys. Your team deserves jerseys that your players and your community can be proud of. And that is what Stimulus Athletic provides. It's not the plain Nike jerseys that you've been wearing for the last 3 years. It's not training tops. It's not pennies. These are jerseys that are honestly, a lot of Stimulus's designs better than what you see in the pros, better than what you see in the Premier League, better than what you see in MLS. And you can, with Stimulus, design your own jerseys as well. I'm actually going to bring something up here for those who are watching. Let's see. Let's go here. All right. So this is StimulusAthletic.com. Now I'm going to click on design your own soccer jerseys. With Stimulus, you can be your own designer. You can go on the website here, pick kind of a base pattern that you want. So let's go with this one. Yep. Boom, boom. I like that. Let's customize, shall we? So we're going to take this kit, this already great looking kit, and we're going to customize this right here on Stimulus's website. Have you ever been to Nike's website and customized a shoe before? This is that, but for jerseys. So I can change the colors. I can go here, I can go here, and I can go here. Or I can maybe I don't want the blue color scheme. Maybe I want a little bit of pink in there. Maybe I want a little bit of purple in there. Maybe I want this to be white. Where do I find white? There we go. Boom. There you go. I've just, any color scheme you want, any base pattern you want, you do this, and then you add your logos, your sponsor logos, your team logos. You can put them on the front, on the sleeve, on the back, doesn't matter. And then boom. In 10 minutes, you have your own custom design kit that you designed, that you put together. You took your team identity and you put it on a kit. No designer needed. Stimulus has great designers. So if you want them to give you a custom look, they can 100% do that. But if you want to give your team the look, if you want to design your team's jerseys, if you want to be the one, with the power in your hands to show your team's identity and design your jerseys for 2023, go to stimulusathletic.com and click that design your own button and just play around. It is free to play around. It is free to kind of check out their design your own selection. You add to cart, you add your names and numbers that you want, sizes, and boom, you are good to go with Stimulus Athletic. It is that easy. So stimulusathletic.com, click design your own, play around, and get started today. And while you are there, let them know that Jeremy and Carter from the 10,000 Pitches podcast sent you over there. Big thanks to our friends at Stimulus Athletic for supporting the show. All right, let's talk doubloons, shall we? Minnesota United's first team, not the only Loons team that is undefeated to start the 2023 campaign. It was a 3-1 win over St. Louis, a comeback win for the Doubloons as well. Fred Emmings makes an early save to keep it 0-0. He does allow one, but he has been very impressive to start the campaign for MNUFC 2. Colombian Juan Camilo Mosquera scores his first MNUFC 2 goal to equalize in the 66th. Cameron Dunbar with a banger free kick actually won MLS Next Pro goal of the match day for match day 2. If you haven't seen this highlight, go check it out. It was an absolute worldie from Dunbar. And then, as impressive as the free kick was, this to me was the highlight of the match. Luis Musanvi tiptoeing the end line, feeding Pacheco right in front of goal for the dagger in the 90th minute. It's Pacheco's third goal of the year, Musanvi's second assist already on the year, and just an amazing job dribbling, tiptoeing that end line, and finding Pacheco. This MNUFC 2 team, I don't think these results are flukes. Going on the road, dominating RSL, or excuse me, Real Monarchs, dominating St. Louis City 2. I am really excited and optimistic with what I have seen from this Doubloons team to start the 2023 campaign. A lot of great players doing great things. It also makes you optimistic for the future of the Minnesota United organization as a whole. All these young kids making nearly immediate impacts.
Yeah, it's been fantastic seeing everyone get their minutes and just make the most of it. With Cameron Dunbar, absolute banger. I'm going to have to disagree. That is definitely the moment of the match for me. That was a beautiful free kick.
It was.
It makes me excited for when we're able to integrate him into the first team, when we need him to step up if there's injuries or such. I'm not that worried when we have him there. And it's not just you and I that are high on MNUFC 2. They're rated number 1 in the MLS Next Pro Power Rankings on MLSsoccer.com.
Yep.
So we're off to a strong start. And it's not something that I anticipate is going to fall off. It's not something that I think is a fluke. Like you said, we are looking at a very strong Doubloons team this year.
Yeah, they're very strong. A lot of great players. Also a great opportunity for guys like Joseph Rosales and, as you mentioned, Cameron Dunbar to sort of get minutes this season as well, because they will obviously be needed as the season goes on, especially when you get into Open Cup time, when you get into Leagues Cup, when you get in kind of like those dog days of August and September where guys are banged up, guys picking up knocks, guys just need rest. Those guys are going to be needed, and getting minutes at the next pro level will, theoretically keep them sharp enough to make an impact once they're needed on the first team level. So really good start for MNUFC 2. Hopefully they can keep it rolling as the campaign goes on. But to go down to the academy level here, this past weekend was the Generation Adidas Cup down in Florida. Both the Loons U15 and U17 sides participating. Neither side made it out of group play, unfortunately, but the U15s did go 0-2-1 in group play. They fell to FC Norrjylland 4-0. They drew Houston Dynamo 1-1 before eventually falling in PKs to the Dynamo. And then they finished up with a 2-1 loss to Orlando City. The U17s went 1-2-0, so they were able to get a win on the campaign. And that was actually their opening match. They blanked host IMG Academy 2-0, then fell 2-0 to the Union, and then finished up with a 1-0 loss to Houston. Even though necessarily the results weren't maybe what we were hoping for getting out of the group stage, this is still a tournament that includes teams from Manchester United, from just all around the world coming in to take on MLS Academy sides. Austin FC's Academy was involved. They have Micah Burton. Just a really good opportunity for some of these kids to go and compete against top level competition from around the globe. And it's really cool to see that global. It's almost like US versus the world, if you will, if you want to make that sort of comparison, where it's these MLS academies taking on academies globally. Really cool opportunity. And honestly, some of these matches were fun to watch. I watched Minnesota's match against IMG. That was fun to watch, see some of these academy kids do their thing. So, just a cool platform. It's cool to see Minnesota was involved.
Yeah, definitely something to keep your eye on. It's nice seeing all these MLS teams playing against these top academies across the world. And it's going to be great for MLS's growth in the future, just allowing them to work their academies.
All right, let's go down and talk lower league news. Signings in both USL League 2 and USLW League, kind of local scenes. On the League 2 side, Minneapolis City signed American University defender Colin Conacher and University of Evansville commit Baraka Tarleton, while Rochester FC signed Brazilian defender Andre Silva, who previously played for the club in the UPSL and attends Bethany Lutheran. And then Drake University's Juan Lopez Artiega also signed for the team. He previously played for pro and semi-pro clubs in Mexico. And then on the W League side, Minnesota Aurora continuing to fill out their roster. They re-sign Ariana Del Moral, Morgan Stone, and they have a new big signing for Minnesota Aurora this year. Vienna Benke, a UW Milwaukee alum with multiple years of professional experience playing in Iceland. We're seeing former pros now joining this Minnesota Aurora team, whether it's in WSL experience or professional experience abroad. Really, it's really cool to see Aurora filling the roster out the way they are. Obviously, they're looking to take that next step and hoist the trophy in 2023. And then on Rochester's side, as they prepare for their inaugural W League season, they sign Eduarda Cristina, who plays for Lincoln Trail College and has club experience in Brazil. Belize International and Campbellsville University player Jada Brown joins Rochester, along with Mayo High School junior Jennifer Reyna. And then finally, on the MPSL side, we have Duluth announcing their first signings of 2023, both returning players with defender Sean Gantley and Paul Bobai. And then Dakota Fusion continue their long list of international signings with a notable local signing, with the Fusion adding Colombian Edward Burgess of Milligan University, Dutchman Emil Nieuwhof of LSU Shreveport, Australian Ben Nicholson of Seton Hall, Hungarian Mate Lengyel of Milligan University, as well as Dylan Ellingson of Monacan, North Dakota. He plays D2 soccer at Lake Erie. This is kind of the time of the year, Carter, where we get all these signings, these teams starting to fill out their roster. Anything notable to you from this group?
I think the biggest thing that we can touch on here is the USLW signings. And it just shows the spectrum that the league is on. When you see players like a high school junior and Jennifer Reyna signing for a team, but then you also see players like Vienna Benke who have that professional experience. And it really just shows you how big this USLW league is and what it does bring to these areas, just allowing people to develop at the high school level, even just getting to train with all of these professional players, but also seeing teams like Aurora just really dig in there and try and win this year by signing these professionals.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big commitment to the squad, and it's a big commitment to, taking that next step. And sort of still being that beacon for women's soccer that people want to go to, be a part of, they want to be a part of what Aurora is doing, obviously. So really cool that they're continuing that here in 2023. Now is where we get to talk US Open Cup, Carter. And this is going to be fun because there were so many cup sets in the second round. Let's start it off with a little local flavor. Makwele Akale, Minneapolis' own, with an assist in Tormenta's 2-1 win over Rio Grande Valley. That's a USL League One team beating a USL championship team. And I would argue, Carter, I think what we have seen here, I'm not going to beat the drum for Pro Rel on Twitter and all this stuff, but to me, USL needs something like Pro Rel between USL League One and the USL Championship, because this is now the second year in a row where we have seen League One sides, for the most part, get the better of USL Championship teams in these matchups. And you look at this and it's like, man, the top half of USL League One may be better than the bottom half of the USL Championship. These teams like Union Omaha, like Tormenta, they deserve an opportunity to kind of move up the ladder a rung and test themselves against the championship clubs, don't they?
Yeah, you might not beat the drum, but I am willing to beat this drum.
Yeah.
I think that Pro Rel really needs a chance at the very least in the United States pyramid. And I think introducing it between USL 1 and USLC is the best way to get it started and to just proof of concept it.
Yeah.
Because like you said, these USL 1 teams are consistently getting results over USLC teams. So I don't think that there's much of a talent disparity between the teams. No. Like, obviously, if you take the top of USLC and the bottom of USL 1, you're going to see some problems. But, like, that's why promotion's usually only the top 3 teams and relegating the bottom 3 teams. It allows these teams to prove what they are and just gives them something to build towards, other than knocking off some ULC teams and some MLS teams in the Open Cup every year.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, you can't tell me Union Omaha, who we'll get to in a second, is not a contender in the USL Championship if they were to move up with the roster they currently have. I just think that's, like, I don't know. It just seems like a no-brainer to me. Some more local ties. Des Moines Menace of USL League 2. They fall to Chattanooga FC 4-1 in the second round. But talk about cup sets. The aforementioned Union Omaha, I mean, just blasting El Paso Locomotive 2-0. This thing wasn't even close. It was dominated by Omaha the entire way. Again, this is a League One team against a championship team. 2-0 the final there. Northern Colorado beats the Colorado Switchbacks, another League One over championship team. NPSL side, Tulsa Athletic knock off USL Championship FC Tulsa, which was the biggest upset of the weekend. But it came this close to being outdone, Carter. This close to being outdone. Crossfire Redmond. You probably have never heard of Crossfire Redmond before this week. They're an NPSL side based out of Seattle. They took a 2-0 lead into the 81st minute over defending Open Cup finalist Sacramento Republic. Sacramento scored goals in the 81st and 85th to tie it up and send it into added extra time. In added extra time, we saw 5 total goals in this one. Crossfire take the lead in the 93rd. Sacramento equalize in the 97th. Sacramento go ahead in the 105th. Crossfire equalize in the 111th. And then the Republic score the winner in the 113th minute. Absolutely wild. I mean, this may have been, if this happened, this would have been up there for biggest upsets in the history of this tournament. Because, I mean, who had heard of Crossfire Redmond before this week? And you're going up against a defending, I guess they're a USL Championship team and not an MLS team, but they made the final of the tournament just last year, and they almost go out in the first round. This had some serious, like, NCAA tournament 16-1 upset vibes happening here. It didn't quite happen, but man, this is kind of that excitement that the Open Cup brings that you really can't match anywhere else.
Yeah, Open Cup season is always my favorite season of the year. It's so fun watching all these lower league teams just really get to prove their mettle against these higher teams. And like you said, you get some bangers of some games with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's crazy. These early rounds are so much fun to watch and see, if teams from lower leagues, if amateur teams, can make it through, like a Tulsa Athletic knocking off their USL Championship counterparts in Tulsa. Cool to see. You'll notice a name we didn't mention in the run of matches is Forward Madison. They were supposed to play their second round match this week, hosting Chicago House AC, but the match was postponed due to severe weather. They will now play Tuesday, April 11th, which means they'll actually go into their second round match knowing who they'd play in the third round if they were to win, because the draw is tonight as we're recording, 5:30 p.m. Central Time on Thursday. So we will know. Forward Madison will know if they do beat Chicago House AC, they'll know immediately who they play in the third round, which could be another matchup against Minnesota United. Possible MNUFC third round matchups. The third round is when Minnesota are joining the tournament. And so possible matchups for them include, Yes, this is going to give you, so the heebie-jeebies. Union Omaha is in play for this. It could be the Madison Chicago winner. Could be the Richmond Cleveland winner, which is another second round match that still needs to be played next week. Could be Indy 11, which would be kind of cool. Could be Louisville City, which would be really cool. Could be Tulsa Athletic, and then PSL team. So, there are a number of different potential fun matchups from different leagues. Is there anyone that you're sort of hoping to see over the others here, Carter?
I think if I had to choose, I'm going to give a top 3. I would love to see us play Union Omaha again and just kind of blow them out of the water, hopefully, to avenge last year.
I don't think many Loons fans would agree with you there. I think they want to avoid Union Omaha as much as humanly possible. But go ahead.
Forward Madison obviously would be an exciting matchup to see, that Minnesota-Wisconsin rivalry. And then I'd love the chance to watch Louisville City. Obviously, they have Joshua Widner, so it'd be amazing to see him play just in person and prove his mettle against an MLS team and really give fans of American soccer a chance to, see what he's got.
Yeah, I think the number one matchup for me would be Indy, kind of rekindling the old rivalry back in the NASL days. I think the Madison Chicago winner would be cool, whether it's Forward Madison. I mean, if it's Chicago, even better, kind of a new fresh matchup. But even if it is Madison, the second straight year having that matchup would kind of provide a little bit of a rivalry aspect to that if it's able to happen a little more often. So I'm with you there. And then I'm with you with Louisville City. I think that's just another fresh matchup, a USL championship team, a really good USL championship team. If they go down to Louisville, that's a really good environment, like an MLS caliber stadium that they'd be playing in, a proper, not saying any of these other teams don't play in proper environments, but there'd be 12 to 15,000 people there cheering against Minnesota United. So it would be a pretty raucous environment for them to play in, which could be a lot of fun if that does end up happening. So yeah, I would say my top 3 are probably Indy, the Madison Chicago winner, and Louisville City for Minnesota there. But we'll have to see again, 5:30 Central Time on Thursday. So if you're listening to the podcast on Friday or after, we already know who Minnesota is going to take on in the third round. So this conversation is moot to you. But another perk to becoming a Patreon, at patreon.com/SodaSoccer. The content is not outdated if you tune in on Patreon. So there you go. All right,
now, Jeremy, with the Open Cup, do you think Minnesota prioritizes it this season?
That's interesting. That's interesting to think about. I think they'll always prioritize league play over Open Cup. But does the undefeated start in league play maybe give Adrian Heath the feeling of we have a bit of a buffer here where maybe we can devote a little more resources? We're not scrounging for points in league play at this point. We're in a pretty good spot. Does that allow a little bit more freedom and a little bit more comfortability to say, hey, okay, we can devote maybe a few more guys, or maybe give our normal starters a few extra minutes in these games? And the loss to Union Omaha last year, does that play into, hey, let's take these games a little more seriously? No, I'm going to say this. It's not meant as disrespect. Is there a better chance that Minnesota makes a run at US Open Cup as opposed to MLS Cup this year? I would argue yes. So even with how good they've been in league play. So there's that aspect to it as well. So we'll have to see. But I think either way, even if it's more of, hey, we see the depth options for the US Open Cup, I think the Vancouver match saw that, if we have to call up a couple guys and piece a few guys in and play guys that are normally on the bench, put them in at starting, this team has some really quality depth this year that maybe they didn't have last year as well. And I think even if they maybe don't devote as many resources to the Open Cup matches as they would with MLS, I still think they're in a better spot this year to make a deeper run than they were last year with how the team was built.
Absolutely.
All right. It's picks time, presented by our friends at Better Edge. No MLS around the league picks this year. We are going to stick strictly with Minnesota and Chicago in this one. And let me bring up the banner here so I can show the people. BetterEdge.com/loons is the link. If you go to BetterEdge.com/loons, that's BETTOR Edge.com/loons, and you sign up with that link, you'll notice, boom, $20 just shows up in your account. You don't have to make a deposit yourself to get that $20. You don't have to do anything else. Just sign up with that code. You'll get $20 in your account. If you say, okay, yep, the $20 is great, but I really don't I'm really not comfortable wagering money. I'm really not comfortable spending this $20. That's fine. There are free versions of things you can do as well. They have EdgeCoin at betteredge.com, which means it's basically play money. You can make picks, make selections, do that sort of thing, enter our MLS Pick'em contest and not wager real money. You can use the EdgeCoin. That's perfectly fine. So again, betteredge.com/loons, $20 in your account for free there. Big thanks to our friends at Better Edge. All right. Our pick from Minnesota United and the Fire. The Loons are actually big underdogs on the road in this one, plus 300, which means you get 3-1 back on your bet. You bet $10 on the Loons to win, they win. You'll make $30 on that bet. You bet $100 on the Loons to win, they win. You get $300 back on that bet. So consider that there. The over-under is also 2.5 total goals. I have 2 picks I really like in this one. I think I made one and you made the other. So I will go first. I think it's the obvious one. I'm taking the obvious one. I'm picking Minnesota to win on the road. 3 wins in 3 road matches this year. Chicago's been kind of a mixed bag. Even if Shaqiri and Gutierrez are in the lineup together, Minnesota, I think, has the defensive quality to keep them off the board. We saw what happened with Joao Klaus against St. Louis, where he was really a non-factor in that one. We saw it happen against Dallas, where, Jesus Ferreira, Sebastian Lletget, Alan Velasco, non-factors for Dallas in that opener. We've seen them neutralize the opponent's best players numerous times so far this season. I can't imagine that would be any different against Chicago. I think it's, safe to predict that it wouldn't be any different in Chicago. Again, the Fire could prove us wrong, but I think from what we've seen, best indicator of future behavior, Shaqiri has underperformed a little bit for Chicago. Minnesota has been very good defensively. I think that bodes well for Minnesota in this one, even if Shaqiri is back. I'm picking Minnesota to win plus 300. What about you?
So I am going with the over on the over 2.5. It's interesting that we haven't really seen that 2.5 change throughout the Loons season.
It's a pretty standard over under.
It is.
If it's really 2 defensively minded teams, you may see it drop down to 1.5. If they think it's going to be a goal fest, you may see it go up to 3.5. But the total goals line in soccer, or at least in MLS specifically, does not really fluctuate.
Yeah, so I'm definitely seeing like a 2-1 Loons win here. I think that Chicago has enough firepower to at least get one past us, especially with those 3 goals they scored against Cincinnati, the 3 they scored against Miami. I think they're good for probably at least 1 against us. But I also do see the Loons really finally getting their chances. I think everything finally starts to gel. I think we put at least 2 past Chicago this week.
So we are going to officially put our picks in after we are done recording here. I am taking Minnesota to win. Carter taking over 2.5 goals. Whether you agree or disagree with us, you can join us and make your picks at betteredge.com. And again, one more time, betteredge.com/loons gets you $20 in your account for free. Nothing additional necessary to get that bonus. So check them out, betteredge.com/loons. Big thanks to Better Edge for helping us out here on the 10,000 Pitches podcast. I'm looking at the notes here. We have come to the end of the episode, Carter. Any parting words, any final thoughts for the fine people watching and listening out there?
If you haven't been watching the Open Cup, you're missing out.
Check it out. Check it out indeed. Can't wait to see who the Loons are matched up with in the 3rd round. Could be very interesting. Again, that draw tonight at 5:30. Bleacher Report, the BR app. I'm not going to go into any additional details on how I feel about the presentation of the Open Cup this year and the streams and whatnot. That's another conversation for another day. But that's coming up. And of course, you got Minnesota, Chicago on Saturday, 7:30 Central Time. About 10:30 p.m. Central Time is when we'll go live with Post Loons. So make sure you're checking that out as well. Big thanks to everybody who's watching, listening, contributing. Patreon.com/SodaSoccer if you want to support our work. SodaSoccer.com to check out all the written work that we are doing there. For Carter Hofer, I'm Jeremy Rushing. This has been the 10,000 Pitches podcast. We'll see you next time.